Negative and zero exponents. Anything raised to the 0 power equals 1. Doesn't matter what number it is. If you have 8 to the 0 power, it equals 1. 89 to the 0 power, it equals 1. Doesn't matter what you type in. If you raise it to the 0 power, it always equals 1. Now, negative exponents, what they do is they change sides of the fraction bar and then they become positive. So for example, if you're in this little box right here, let me draw a new fraction bar. This a is negative on the top part of the fraction. I would move it down to the bottom, so I take the base and the exponent, but now the exponent is positive. Now the same sort of thing happens if you've got a negative exponent on the bottom part of your fraction, like b to the negative 5 power. In order to change this and make it positive, I would have to move it up so it changes sides of the fraction bar, and then it becomes a positive 5. So let's look at some examples. Example 1, a to the 0 power. Well, anything raised to the 0 power equals 1. And today when we're simplifying these, we cannot leave any 0 or negative exponents. Now you have to be careful on number 2. A lot of people think that the answer to this one is just 1, but the answer is actually 12, because exponents only apply to the number or letter that they are touching, and this 0 only applies to the y. So here's what's actually happening. Y to the 0 power does equal 1, but if they're squished together like that, that means we're multiplying, and 12 times 1 is still just 12. So that's why a lot of the times when we see something with a 0 exponent, we just mark it out because multiplying by 1 does not change anything. Okay, example 3. All right, so the very first thing that I notice is that I do have a 0 exponent in here. I'm going to go ahead and cross that out. Now let's go ahead and make our new fraction bar and start moving some stuff around. Now a to the negative 2 power only applies to the a. This 5 does not have an exponent, so it is going to stay on the top where it already was. Now the a value, since that one has a negative exponent, it is going to have to move. Right now it's negative on the top, so if we take the base and the exponent and change it and move it down to the bottom part of the fraction, now it's a positive 2. Now that I'm on the bottom row, I have a negative exponent attached to this c, which means that we need to move this one. Since it's negative on the bottom part of a fraction, we are going to move it up, and now it's a positive 3. Now the last letter that I need to deal with is right here, d to the 6th power. If something already has a positive exponent, it is going to stay on the side it was already on. So d to the 6th power stays there at the bottom, and now we're done. We do not have any 0 or negative exponents left, so we're finished. Example 4. A common mistake on this problem is a lot of people are very tempted to move the negative 3 because they get used to moving negative exponents. But negative 3 is not an exponent, so it does not move. It would stay right where it was on the top part of the fraction. Now, x to the 3rd power also already has a positive exponent, so I would go ahead and leave it on the top where it already was. But the y has a negative exponent. Since it's on the top right now, let's move it down to the bottom, and now it's got a positive 2 exponent. And on the bottom, z to the 0 power is 1, so I'm going to mark it out because multiplying by 1 does not change anything. We don't have any negative or 0 exponents left, so we are finished. All right, example 5. So I make my new fraction bar. I can see that I have a to the 0 power, so I can go ahead and mark that one out. I have a negative exponent on the top part of my fraction, so I'm going to move that x, and it moves down and becomes a positive 1 exponent. Now on the bottom row, I have that 4. It does not have an exponent, so it stays on the bottom. Y to the 5th power is also already positive, and since it's on the bottom, we leave it on the bottom. Now, if you don't have anything remaining on the top part of your fraction, you are supposed to put a 1. And this is the one time that you actually have to have that 1 there. So, when I put my final answer together, one thing you need to be careful of The big numbers, the coefficients, they need to go on the front of that row. And then as far as the letters go, they're supposed to be in alphabetical order. So x would come before y. Now x to the first power, it does still have that imaginary 1, but I dropped it. The only time you actually have to keep a 1 is if it's alone on the top part of the fraction. Number 6. All right, I've got a negative exponent, so I know it needs to change sides of a fraction bar, but it's not a fraction yet. Well, we're going to use the same trick that we did when we were working with slope. Put a 1 on the bottom, because dividing by 1 does not change your number, it just changes the way that it looks. So now it's easier for you to see that this negative exponent is on the top part of a fraction, so it moves down, and now it becomes a positive 8. Now this 1 does not change up here, it is still technically down here, but since we ran out of stuff on the top, we have to put a 1. So for my final answer, if I'm getting rid of the unnecessary 1, I would have 1 divided by b to the positive 8th power. Now I put another example right here. That one is very similar to the one that we just did. The big number does not have an exponent. It would stay on the top part of the fraction. Since the y has the negative exponent, it would change sides and move down to the bottom. Number 8. Okay, so I have a problem. I've got a negative exponent, but it doesn't have a fraction. So let's do the same thing we did on the other one. Put a 1 on the bottom. Now c to the 3rd power is already positive, so it is going to stay on the top where it already was. So c to the 3rd right there. Now d to the negative 4th power is negative on the top, so this is one that we are going to move. It changes sides, moves down to the bottom, and now it's a positive 4. Now this 1 is still technically right here, but I'm not going to write it because it's not alone on the top part of the fraction, so it's not necessary. Number 9. I've got a negative exponent, so I'm going to go ahead and make my new fraction bar. The 2 is alone on the top and it doesn't have any exponent, so it's going to stay up there. Now the k is negative, and since it's on the bottom right now, I'm going to move the letter and the exponent up to the top. Now it's a positive 4. When there's nothing on the bottom, there is an imaginary 1, but 2 divided by 1 is still just 2, so my answer is 2k to the 4th power.